Welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast
with Garrett Williamson.
Health, wellness, exercise, nutrition, and a whole lot more. Got questions? Call us and leave a message at 251-278-EDGE or message us at Personal Edge Fitness on Facebook and Instagram, at Team PE on Twitter, or personaledgefitness.com.
Well, hello and welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast. We're going to get into discussing fat. Why do we have it? What does it do? And when we have too much of it, how do we get rid of it? How do we maintain some of it? You're going to hear some different things come up in this episode, just like the last episode I did on metabolism. I talked about metabolism, and I want to break down the different parts of the body and the different tissues that we deal with, and exactly what are they. This goes to the theme of dispelling myths of fitness and nutrition, and also trying to keep everybody informed on exactly what you're talking about, because a lot of these words, they get confused, they get strange definitions attached to them, or alliterations, and you're much better off being clear on the information. So let's dive right into fat. Boy, does that sound appealing. What is fat? You've got basically, it's the same type of fat, but you got fat on your body. You've also got fat in the food that we eat. Believe it or not, they're a lot like the same thing, but just because we take in fat that we eat, there's fat in our foods or whatever, does not mean it's going to become fat on the body. If you listen to these podcasts very long, you find out I'm a huge fan of stand-up comedians, and that's one of the things Jerry Seinfeld was talking about, the food. We've gone crazy with the food. And he said, gosh, what's on the back of this? Carbohydrates. There's fat. Oh my gosh, there's fat in there. It's in there. It's going to be in me. It's going to end up on me. And that's pretty well how we look at that, but that's not really true. Again, what is fat? Well, the fat that's on your body is actually a fuel source. It's stored fuel. Body does not store muscle. It doesn't have a muscle sticking over the side. I got this over here in case that shoulder goes out or whatever. It makes that stuff and breaks it down on a continual basis. In fact, if you want to know more about that, stay tuned for our next podcast, which we dive into muscle. We actually go in and tell you about muscle and all the traits of that. But we don't store bone. We don't have a bone sticking over the side or whatever. In case that femur goes out, we're going to stick another one over there. Our body actually regrows those cells and what have you when we have damage to it, put it back together. What the body does is when we take in too many calories, it stores it in a tissue, and it's called fat, and it sticks it in different places of your body. The body uses fat. It actually stores it. It's a fuel source. It also has many other important functions in the body, which is why we need a moderate amount. And besides just energy, it does something else. It's there for warmth. It's insulation. You're actually supposed to have a certain amount of fat on you. When we think of the ultimate in fat, we think of blubber. Another comedian, Jim Gaffigan, said it's the only thing that ever sounds like it actually is, blubber. But that's the ultimate in fat, blubber on a whale. The reason that whales can swim in such cold temperature, cold waters or whatever, is because of the blubber. It is actually insulation on them, and it keeps them warm. Blubber is going to come back up in energy field also, because Eskimos and Native Americans actually consumed fat in large quantities for energy. Now, this is going to sound funny, because we've always learned to stay away from fat. Don't eat fat. That actually started back in the 50s, and when we started believing there's such thing as good food and bad food, we found out that fat was a 4-letter word, not a 3-letter word. But actually, up until that point, it was actually, everybody knew it was quote-unquote good for you because it was actually energy. It was a lot of energy, and in many cases, Native Americans especially, if they shot an animal and consumed it for food, the first thing they would eat on it was the fat. And the reason they were doing that is because they were using food for energy, which is what we're supposed to be doing. And so they would actually consume the highest amount of energy, and that was actually in fat. And so it's stored on an animal just like it's stored on us, not only as warmth, but as an energy source. If you've ever heard of the idea that somebody is hot-natured, or maybe you feel like you're hot-natured. You can find people that are typically overweight and they feel as if they're hot-natured. They need the air conditioner set much cooler. They find themselves in situations where they sweat too much if the room is not cool enough. Typically that's because they have a large amount of this insulation on their body, and it's just like wearing an extra coat. I've always found it funny that we use this term hot-natured. There's a lot of funny terms that we come up with when we're trying to deal with images and especially myths of health and nutrition. Another one's muscle bound. I'll mention that in an earlier podcast. The idea that we're so bound up with muscle we can't move, and that's something that's completely made up. Well, I hate to tell you, but the hot-natured is one that is made up too. It's kind of a thought process that the cosmos around me are such that my aura causes the molecules in the air to emit a heat, and it rises to a level of unmeasurable to mankind. No. It's just an accumulation of body fat. That's all. But the good news is you can reverse it. You can turn it right around without a problem. And believe it or not, don't have to actually be big to experience this. You don't have to have large amounts of body fat on your body to experience this. We notice this in our Catalyst program when people go through it, and we have people in there that they want to lose weight. Got people in there that want to lose in the 30, 40, 45 pounds, even more, and but we've got people in the program that need to lose maybe 7 to 10 pounds, and they're just wanting to get things straightened out as far as their nutrition is concerned. We've even noticed with our people that are 7 to 10 pounds, they drop a few pounds of fat, and they're setting the thermostats up higher. It's amazing. But the reason I say that is that you have thin people that have an imbalance in their tissue. Now, that's a Garrett description, imbalance in your tissue, that you have higher percentage of body fat and a lower percentage of muscle. Now, if you have it, what I call a positive balance, you have a higher percentage of muscle mass as opposed to body fat, or more so, have a lower percentage of body fat. That's a positive situation, and that's where you're going to experience those temperature changes as far as being cold or what have you. But you can have that and be thin. That's surprising to people when I tell them that. I actually do their body fat, and they'll ask me to measure it again, because if you have body fat over 30%, if your body fat's over 30%, that's what the definition of obesity is. And you'd be shocked at how many people that I measure, my staff measures, that are quote-unquote thin, but have a body fat over 30%. And it really shocks them, because there's no way I can be obese. Look how thin I am. But actually, they're in not good health. Believe it or not, that's caused by, in many cases, by not taking in enough calories, not taking in, believe it or not, in some cases can be taking in enough fat. The one thing that your body, its first goal is to keep this body alive. I mean, you think about it. Your first goal, if you have children, is to keep take care of your children, keep your children alive. If you're by yourself, your first response is to keep yourself going, is keep yourself alive. And that's what your body's job is. It's not to accomplish any great task. Its first job is to keep this body alive. Now, why do I bring that up? It goes back to thin people being obese. Many times in those cases, what's happening is they're taking in too few calories. If they're taking in too few calories, a lot of times they'll end up having a gut. Almost looks like a beer gut. I've had numerous clients that have actually had this quote-unquote thin beer gut, and I'm saying, you know what, you need to take in more calories. That's what's happening. Oh my gosh, now grab that beer gut. Look at this. There's no way. I've got all this excess. I need to take in less. Well, let me tell you what's happening. Go back to what I was talking about. The body's first job is to keep the body moving, keep it alive. Well, if you're starving it, think of like a construction site. You got to build a house. You need a bunch of wood to do that. The truck shows up to deliver the wood, and they deliver 7 2x4s. Well, it's not going to be enough to build the house. You can't build the house. At the same time, it's freezing cold outside. You have nothing to stay warm except this fire here. Now, are you going to build a house, or are you going to burn the wood for fire? Well, you're going to burn the wood for fire. You're going to have it there. And if you have any left over, and if this happens 2 or 3 days in a row, and you have 1 or 2 boards left over, you're going to stick them aside most likely next to that fire pit. You're going to be more concerned, well, I'll wait till all the wood shows up to build this house, but the first thing, I'm going to make sure I have a few boards over here, because last night we didn't have enough boards to burn. I almost froze to death. Well, silly analogy, I know, but that's what your body's doing. You starve your body. It's not going to build muscle. It's not going to maintain muscle. It's not going to take care of bone. The first thing it's going to do, it's going to make sure it has enough energy to keep you moving. And if you have any left over, and you've done this for a long time, gone through this, what I call a starvation process, taking in too few calories, you've trained your body that, okay, I'm not going to feed you, so you need to do something about maintaining energy. So if it has any extra calories, it's going to store it as fat. And that's where you have people that are thin, that, believe it or not, they've got a gut on them, or in a lady's situation, or somebody that has more of a mesomorph type of body, or endomorph type of body. They're going to have excess fat around their legs and hips, and it's a kind of a vicious cycle for those people. I said earlier that fat's not really a bad thing. We made it a bad thing when 50, 60 years ago when we started criminalizing food, but it's actually a good thing in that we used to eat enough to cause our body to put fat on, because it helped us through slim times. Early ancestors trying to get through the winter, just like storing food for the winter, they would actually do what a bear does, taking a lot of food, live off that fat during the winter, and then, hibernate and what have you. Like, we didn't hibernate, but we did the same type of process. They overate and they kept themselves warm. They also knew that they didn't know when their next meal was going to come, so they had this stored energy, and they could actually keep moving and living off the fat until they had something else to eat. And that's why I'm saying fat really was a good thing. The reason we're seeing it now is back to what I was talking about if you heard my last podcast, which was on metabolism. And that is not because we're eating fat, it's because we're eating too much. Now, what's happening there? Well, that's pretty easy to say. Well, Garrett, when you eat too much, you end up getting fat in your body. But why? Well, go back to what we were just talking about. Our body's smart. And it says, okay, Garrett, if you're feeding me all these extra calories, evidently there's something coming up you're planning for. There's a tough winter. you're going on a hike, you're going into some sort of a starvation situation. And so I'm going to store this fat, and you train your body to store that fat. You train your body not to use it. You train to store it, especially if you start on a regular eating pattern where you're eating so much that your body has no reason to go into the stores of fat. It is using that ready energy from the food that you're putting in your body. Therefore, it's going to keep maintaining that fat. Maintaining fat. It's an interesting topic. Because I know that everybody knows, and you probably know this, that if I were to ask you, Pablo, let me ask you this. You see if you know this or not.
Okay.
In order to keep muscle, do you have to maintain it?
Do I have to maintain it
Yes.
to keep
muscle?
To maintain their size? I would think so.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I know the muscle itself doesn't just disappear, but to keep it big and swole, yeah.
Exactly. And actually, if you don't use your arms at all, it wouldn't disappear, believe it or not.
Atrophy,
but you have
right?
to, exactly, to have that size, you've got to maintain it. Okay, on that same thought process, do you think that you have to maintain bone?
Don't think I've ever thought of it.
Well, and most people don't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect you to. Most people don't. Think about this, though. Osteoporosis, lack of calcium.
Right.
Heard of those things?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay,
you lose bone, sure.
Exactly. Well, the way you lose bone is by not maintaining it and making sure that you have the right nutrients, because if you starve yourself, it'll start draining on that bone, so you have to maintain it. In order to keep fat, do you have to maintain it?
To keep fat?
Believe it or not, the answer is yes.
Really?
Yes. And I'll tell you what I mean. This is not from just that you should have a certain amount of fat on your body at all times. I'll get into that in a minute. But what I'm talking about is the people that come to me and they say, look, I had a baby and I got this baby fat and I want to get rid of this baby fat. Fantastic. We do a lot of that. That's great. Who's your baby? Well, it's the 17-year-old standing next to me. What's interesting about that is that I hate to tell you, that's not the baby fat.
His name's Dylan and he drove me here.
What I'm getting at is that if you've got 30% body fat and you maintain that, what you're actually doing is you're continuing to eat, like I was saying earlier. You're continuing to eat. Your body's continually making those stores and storing that fat or maintaining that fat. And it's an old adage that I say, if you want to be 200 pounds, eat for 200 pounds. You want to be 140, eat for 140. If you eat for 200 and you want to be 140 and you eat for 180, you're going to be 180. And that's exactly how the body works. And so the fat that you've got on you, you actually do end up maintaining. And that's actually, believe it or not, folks, that's good news. It sounds like it's bad news, but it really is good news. And the reason I say it's good news is that all you got to do to get rid of it is stop maintaining it. It really is as simple as that. And that sounds ridiculous, but if you think of it that way and you go at it that way, it's much simpler, and it is very, very true. You can reverse that process very easy. I cannot believe we are like 18, 19 minutes into this. And I have yet to have a drink of this water. I'm telling you, that is my mantra. You know what I mean? I'm all over that, and I'm way behind on my game here. Folks, when you hear me take a sip, and I better take another. Pablo, my producer's over here doing the exact same thing. He's right with me, whatever. Exactly. Make sure that you're taking in plenty of water, folks. Every time you hear me drink that, I want you to take in some water also. Water's fantastic for all the functions of the body. It is involved, believe it or not, in this talk that we're doing right now. It's wonderful for you, and make sure that when you hear that sound, you're taking in some water, and only water, folks. Only water. Now, back to fat. Some fat now is always good. You'll never be 0% body fat, and it's not something you should strive for. Believe it or not, those are the people typically that end up becoming thin and obese when they're actually trying to get to a 0% body fat. And 0% body fat, let's just make this very simple and get into a deep discussion on this. A quest for 0% can kill you. You're not interested in that. You have no defenses built up. You don't have anything to live off of. Or when you get sick and your diet is affected, cravings are affected, your hunger's affected. That's how you survive the hospital a lot of times, believe it or not, is having a little bit of fat on you. Pablo, you're a comedian fan too, and I can't think of the one who said this.
Yeah.
I want to say he's a Southern comedian, but it may have been Ron White. I'm not sure, but he said, you're way too big to be kidnapped.
Right.
I don't remember who that was. I remember the line.
Remember the line? Yeah, exactly. But I think, hey, there's some good about fat, but not quite what I'm talking about, but there's some good about fat. So, and there's also, just to explain the extra layer, that's a question I get a lot about fat, that women have an extra layer of it that men don't. Well, that's true. And it's basically there for protection and for childbearing. And some people argue, and it's been studied and it's been stated that it's also there to maintain curves and what have you, and have that effeminate look and cause attraction in males. I'm a red-blooded male. I tend to know something about that, so it doesn't escape many of us. Yeah, amen. Doesn't escape many of us. So that's why they have that extra layer. And typically, when we measure men, they want to be somewhere between 11 and 21%. Women, it's usually a little bit higher, up as high as maybe 24, 25% body fat. It's a source of energy. It's also a source of warmth. We can be thin and have a lot of fat on us. We can be overweight, of course, and have a lot of fat on us. But I think I'm going to tackle one part of this that I'm sure everybody wants to know, and that is, how do you get rid of fat? What is the key to getting rid of fat? And so, folks, before we get into this, I want to drive something home that I spoke about in the metabolism podcast, and it's something you'll hear me say a lot because it's ridiculous. It's just it's a gimmick that people use to sell all kinds of worthless stuff, and that is the types of fat. There's the stubborn belly fat. That's one I hear all the time. It gets rid of stubborn belly fat. And there's one that permeated the 80s and 90s. You don't hear it quite as much. I don't have fat. I have cellulite. That's not fat. I literally have clients telling me back in the 90s, I don't have fat. I just got this cellulite on me, folks. It's fat. And fat is fat. And if you make it all these complicated things, it's going to seem like it's a lot harder to get rid of or break down. It's not. Fat is fat. The first way to get rid of fat, well, of course, don't take it in. That's pretty simple. And I'm not talking about taking in fat. There's really nothing wrong with taking in the nutrient known as fat. Fats, oils, carbohydrates, proteins, these kind of things. When you hear fat like that, it's not so much you want to avoid that as much as you don't want to take in too many calories. If there's a red meat, if you like red meat, by all means, fantastic protein source. And some of the steak, the cuts aren't as lean as others. I understand that. You've got to take that into effect when you're tracking your calories, like I said in the metabolism talk. But the fat on it, really, you cut the fat, you kill the burger. I mean, that's not just a lethal weapon quote. That comes from my father-in-law. I wasn't talking about taking the fat. Just don't take in too many calories. You start tracking your calories, don't take as much in. You're going to teach your body to burn those calories. You're going to teach your body to burn that fat. Therefore, you won't store excess amounts of fats. And like I said in the metabolism, check that out. Track it. Don't guess at it. Don't think that I'm not taking in enough. Don't perceive it. Track it. Another way, folks, is my absolute favorite. It happens to be the best. It happens to be the best nutrition advice I can give you. Drink water. Drink water. Though Ron White and I disagree about this because what his mother told him, water does cut cravings. Usually you are thirsty. That's why you're craving. And if you drink some water, you'll kill that. And drinking water does wonders for getting rid of fat. I've taken fat off of a thin person, believe it or not. A rather thin but healthy person that had a little bit of a gut, not because he wasn't taking in enough calories, but because it happened to be in that short time of his life, he was taking in a few too many calories. So he did end up with a little bit of a gut, and he wasn't able to exercise. Told him to up his water intake. This guy did it. He did it like a bodily function. He started drinking. I got his water all the way up to 100 ounces, and within 3 weeks, he told me his gut was gone. And it's true. And it's mainly because he was making himself stop craving. Number 3 is easy as burn it off. 15 minutes in cardio to get to a fat burning stage. Now, what I mean by that, cardio, when I say cardio, I mean at least 70 to 75% of your maximum heart rate. If you're in that zone, that conversational pace, and you're in there for 15 minutes or more, you get into a fat burning stage. Fat's like a log. It burns very slow. Muscle burns like toilet paper. Fat burns like a log. You've got to get in there and be in there a while to start burning it. But even faster than that, or even better than that, we also used to think the way to get rid of fat and whatever was to get on the cardio and just to go, cardio. Actually, faster than that, believe it or not, strength training. I'm not against cardio. I'm a triathlete. I'm all for it, but strength training. The reason being is that what you're doing when you're doing strength training, you're not just expending calories doing the exercise, and probably you're going to expend less than you're actually doing a cardio exercise. But what ends up happening is you end up building muscle, which is a positive tissue. It takes calories. It burns calories to survive. And actually, it will continue to burn calories well after the workout. So you'll see a workout that in the workout itself, you may have burned a couple of 100 calories. That could be worth thousands of calories on down the road. So strength training also. I did say something about track your calories. Make sure you're tracking those. But the last one is eat for your weight and shoot for small changes. Like I said earlier, if you're 200, you want to be 160. Don't try to be 160 tomorrow. Go 200 and try to be 195. Then go to 190. Then go to 188, 180, 87. The reason I'm telling about these slow changes, everybody wants that instant gratification. I want to drop 10 pounds. But the reason that people gain it all back is because they're not used to living at that weight. They have the same habits. They're doing the same things. They're just forcing themselves for a temporary time to take in less calories. But if you would eat for that small change, you almost don't notice it. Your body almost doesn't notice it, and you can slowly teach yourself your habits. By the way, by the time you've taken all that time, it takes 21 days to create a habit. By the time you've taken that time, you've slowly tracked yourself down. and you get to whatever your goal weight is, it feels like you're doing the exact same thing that you always did. It's almost like watching grass grow. You don't notice the difference. I could talk all day about fat. I don't think anybody wants to hear me talk all day about fat, but that's basically what it is. Energy source, a source of warmth. Don't be afraid to take some of it in, especially on a good piece of meat or what have you. Easy to get rid of, easy to burn. Use those steps and you'll get there, I'm sure. It's far easier to maintain than you think. And if you have too much, seek that lifestyle change program. I'm talking about lifestyle change coming soon in a podcast, as a matter of fact. But seek that lifestyle change program that takes small steps to get you there. Remember, stay hydrated.
Thanks for listening to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast with Garrett Williamson. Subscribe now and be a part of the show by calling 251-278-EDGE or message us on Facebook and Instagram at Personal Edge Fitness or at Team PE on Twitter, and visit us at personaledgefitness.com.